Hey, welcome to Response, a talk about true worship. And today I'm so excited to go over the topic of songwriting for the church today and why that's so important. So you're going to want to stick around for that. Hi, I'm Johnny Zacchio. Welcome to Response, and today I'm so excited and delighted to have Scott Cunningham. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Johnny. Blessed to be here.
I just wanted to talk to you today about just various things, topics regarding worship ministry, specifically songwriting.
Yeah.
But before we get into that, I want to just ask you, maybe just tell us a little bit about where you've been in ministry, kind of when did you know that the Lord was calling you to serve, and where are you at currently right now, and what does the Lord have you doing currently in your life?
Yeah, so for me it started back right before Bible college for me. I mean, I grew up in a Christian home. My parents brought me up in the Lord, and so I just had a real desire to serve the Lord at a young age, and so I had a lot of great experiences when I was younger, being involved with different worship teams and bands and kids ministry stuff when I was a kid. So I just had that kind of in my heart as a young guy. And when I got out of high school, I went to community college and was pursuing some architecture, direction that I kind of had a knack for, I wanted to pursue. And as I was pursuing that, I just remember looking around at my class and looking at these guys that had such a passion for that, and asking myself those hard questions like, is this really what you're made to do, called to do, supposed to do? And I had to honestly respond to that question in my heart of no, I really don't have a passion to be an architectural engineer for the rest of my life. So these guys do, and they're awesome at it. And so after taking some classes and kind of just thinking through that and realizing that I really felt a tug, I wanted to serve the Lord, but I didn't know what it was going to look like. I didn't have anybody walking up to me and saying, "Thus saith the Lord, God has called you to be a worship leader or a pastor," And those are the kind of things that you kind of want sometimes, just someone to validate this desire you have. But it was really just a simple, a tug, a burning desire to want to know the Lord more, want to grow in my faith. And I would hear guys like Brian on the radio and John Corson and Chuck, and just wanting to know the Bible like they knew the Bible. And so I remember listening to the radio. I was working at a cabinet shop making cabinets, and the radio was always on when I would be listening to it throughout the day, and they would always talk about Bible college. It always came up, and Corson would talk about it, and Chuck would mention it, and so I should go check it out. I should just go see what it's like. So it was up in Twin Peaks at the time, so I went up to the mountains and took a couple days and was just checking it out, the classes and the kind of the community up there and stuff. And so just going there, I was like, yeah, I'm supposed to be here. I think I want to be here. I want to go and be a part of this and grow with these guys. And so saved up for my first semester, went to Bible college, and it was at Bible college where I started learning guitar and started leading for our chapels here and there, and 3 chords, 3 songs, that's all I knew, and just play them every time. And it just began this desire to want to really serve in ministry, but I didn't know what that was going to look like. And really growing up, there was no thought in my mind necessarily of vocational ministry, okay, I'm going to go try to get a job at a church, or I just knew that I wanted to be around that, and I wasn't sure how that was all going to work out. So I met my wife at Bible college. We got married, came back to Bible college, married. She was working for the Bible college at the time. And Brian Broderson was coming up to the mountains and sharing at chapels and talking about what God was doing around the world. And I had never really heard, I just was so inspired by that vision for the world. He had such a heart for global missions and the church, just seeing churches planted and stuff. And so my heart started to burn. We started talking about wanting to send young people over to England and plant churches and stuff. So at the time, I was like, yes, I think that's, I really feel like that's what we're supposed to do. And I was talking to my wife about it, but we weren't in the financial position at the time. We had a little bit of debt, and we were just newly married and trying to figure out life and stuff. And so all that turned into like, man, I want to go to Brian's church. I want to go to a church like that that's very mission-minded and has a heart to see churches planted. And so anyway, long story short, went down to Vista. We moved down there looking for a job, and a couple weeks later, a job opening came up at the church, actually, and it was for to be like an assistant youth pastor / edit Brian's radio show / play drums for the worship team / whatever else they want you to do and need you to do. Yeah. And so that door opened, and it was like, for me, I couldn't believe like I would get a chance to serve the Lord and make a living for my family, doing what I just had a passion for. So that was the beginning for me. I was around some dear friends at the time that were on staff there as well. So we were doing mission trips and doing all these different things. And over the time, I was serving in a youth ministry, leading worship there, and sometimes in the church, and started writing some songs back then. Songs. One of the first songs was I Wait for the Lord and My Soul Thirsts, and some of those songs that were kind of coming out of my devotional time, reading through the book of Psalms. And I'd start singing those in the youth group and in the church a little bit. And so it just kind of progressed and developed over the years. About 5 years, we were there for about 5 years at Vista. I became the high school pastor at the time. And at the time, John Wickham had moved to North County, San Diego, and his boys were going to the school there, and John, or Evan and Phil were going to the youth group a little bit as well, so they were part of that season. So we were doing a lot of ministry with those guys when they were young. And then I just had this burning desire, this passion to see young people equipped in their faith, to know the Lord, know their Bibles, and to be encouraged to serve God with their gifts. That was a real big part of it. So that was like the beginning of the Lord giving me this like real desire to see young people equipped for God's call in their life. So fast forward a few years, and I got a call from Brian, who was leaving England. He had left about a year into when I was at Vista to go take over the church that he had planted in London. So at the time, Pastor Chuck had really wanted Brian to move back. I had been asking him for years to come back to be involved in the church, so he wanted to do a transition. So Brian, finally, the Lord was just really putting on his heart to go back. So in 2000, he came back with Cheryl to do like a 3-year transition with Pastor Chuck. So it was this kind of scheduled vision. Chuck wanted to hand it off to Brian and just be free to minister at different places. And so Brian comes back on staff. He starts hiring some younger guys and just getting new people on the team there. And so I was one of those guys. I got a call from Brian just saying, hey, pray about coming and being the worship leader at Costa Mesa. And just the backstory of that is I grew up in Orange County. When I left Orange County, I was just like, you know what, I'm never moving back here. This is my past, and God's doing a new thing. I met my wife who was from Washington, and I thought maybe the Lord would lead us to Washington or maybe on the mission field or something. But I got that call from Brian, and all of a sudden my heart started to burn for like Orange County again, like just a real passion for it. Before I drive in, I'm like, oh, I'm so glad I don't live here anymore, and I just never moved, And then all of a sudden I got this call, and I just felt like, gosh, I want to go back. I want to go be involved in what the Lord is doing there at the church, and where God had brought me up there as a kid, went to school there as a kid, church there as a kid. Like the Lord was calling me to go back there and serve there. So that was in 2000, and so I came in as the worship leader in 2000 and was really over my head in what I was doing. I was still very new, and very simple musician, and didn't have a ton of experience as far as leading at that point and developing teams and stuff. So there's a lot to learn for me. So we come back, and one of the things I didn't see God preparing my heart for was what he was going to do in the next generation of young people. Joey Brand was with Brian at that early days as well, and so he had this vision for worship generation, and that was like
what was worship generation? What was that kind of entailing?
Yeah, so that kind of started with this vision for Joey, because back in Vista, me and Joey were going to schools, and Joey would teach. I'd lead worship, he'd teach, and these guys were getting saved. Like at Fallbrook High School, a bunch of these kids were getting saved, and the cheerleaders and the football players, and these guys were coming to faith, and Joey, we would be there, and Joey's like, this is a worship generation. Like these guys are passionate about the Lord, and so he's excited for that and serving together. So Joey comes to Costa Mesa, and I ended up coming a few months later, and he ended up starting a Thursday night Bible study called Worship Generation, which ended up being Monday nights ended up being kind of the slot for it eventually. And it was really this. He was just this guy that Lord was raising up to reach the next generation of young people at the time and to encourage them to use their gifts for the Lord. And so guys like Jeremy Camp and Phil Wickham and Evan Wickham and Zach Vesnes and a bunch of these young musicians and guys that just had a heart, Joseph Tada, these heart to serve the Lord with their gifts, really gifted. He was given an opportunity for them to lead and to grow. And we did a couple like early on CDs that were really raw and really rough. It was like a 2 mix off the board, but everyone like loved it because it was real and authentic and really out of tune, but it was great, you know, just, so it was just sweet. It was kind of organic thing the Lord was doing. They were taking these little tours and ministering to different churches. And so Worship Generation was like had about a 4-year run there. And in the midst of that 4 years, there was all these young people that were coming that just wanted to serve the Lord as well. And they were being challenged by Joey to do that. And so I woke up one night to what at the time was like a dream, a bit of a vision of doing a week camp in the mountains for worship leaders. You know, like what if we got like really good musicians up there and great Bible teachers, and we just got away for a week and we sought the Lord and encouraged these guys and equipped them as much as we could in a week. And I remember just thinking, I'm going to write this down because I don't remember dreams, and so I'm going to write it down so I can remember it in the morning. So I wrote it down and woke up the next day and go, oh, that's right, I dreamt about this, you know. And I shared it with a friend, and he's like, well, what about like a school of worship? And my honest thoughts were, oh gosh, like what would we do for a year? Like how would we, what would we teach for a year, you know? And how much content would we need to do a school in that regard? So we started thinking through that and meeting with some guys. He had a background in education, my friend Brian at the time, and so we started thinking through, we can kind of model it after the School of Ministry. So it's like a School of Ministry or like a kind of Bible college for worship leaders. So guys that, you know, want to know the Bible, want to serve in the local church, but need some training musically as well. They need a chance to learn to lead. They need a chance to learn to support and get a chance to cut their teeth in these different you know, positions and opportunities. So a lot of times as worship leaders, there's these guys that have this raw gift, and they just need a chance, someone to believe in them or get a chance to learn it, because maybe in the real world they try, they fail, and they're like never asked again, you know. So we thought, well, if we could give them some tools in their toolbox, things that we've learned over the years that will help support them in that ministry, so they can be, you know, in the best sense of the word, successful, effective. That'd be so awesome, you know. So, and part of that was kind of in line with what I felt God had given me a burden for, was in Isaiah 58, this promise the Lord had given me at the time was, and still to this day, is like, you shall raise up the foundation of the next generation. That's basically like, was the verse that God had given me. And so that's kind of been the mission, is how can we raise up the foundation of the next generation, you know, of young people? How can we give them as much Bible and as much practical you know, help and theology as much as we can give them to be effective in their ministry. So the School of Worship was birthed, I think, in 2002, in those years of Worship Generation. We started with 11 students, and it was just this chance to kind of pour into them. And so every year it would kind of grow a little bit more, and it was great that we started small, because we just were able to kind of grow with the school. We didn't have a ton of resources. We had some space, but we had some great teachers in the area, pastors and worship leaders and professional musicians that were kind of all pouring into them. And so it would grow every year. And so I think it's been 15 years now we've been doing the school. So we just started a second year where we retain you know, students that want to go a little deeper and be used a little bit further in their in the ministry around Costa Mesa and different churches and stuff. So to me, it's amazing. It's amazing how fast time has flown by. Like, that feels like yesterday, you know, when we started, but it's amazing to see what God's done over the last 15 years and seeing the school grow. I think we've got 77 students this year between first and second year. And yeah, it's amazing. It's a work of the Lord. So it was God's heart, God calling us back to Costa Mesa, giving us a heart and vision for training, equipping, giving us the opportunity to do it, bringing students every year. And we just feel like, wow, Lord, when you let the Lord write the story for your life, like, you would have never scripted that yourself, but it's you know, wonderful. I mean, I've got 5 daughters. I would have never scripted that for myself, you know, but the Lord knew, and it's wonderful. You know, it's such a gift of God's grace. So yeah, some of the big takeaways of the last 17 years. I've been on staff at 17 years now, Costa Mesa.
Wow. Praise God, man. That's so awesome. Yeah, so those are some of the first songs that you wrote. Yeah. Then you said, I Wait for the Lord, and then My Soul Thirsts, yes. Right? And so if maybe talk a little bit about, like, maybe some of the first songs that you wrote, and maybe I Wait for the Lord. Like, how did the Lord birth that in your heart, and how did you sort of come up with that?
Yeah, for me, being a musician, I was kind of a late nighter for many years, and that's kind of changed now that I'm older. We've talked about it before, but I'm like better in the morning now than I was before. But I was, a lot of times it was late night, and having a young family, I would just be, finding little moments to be creative. And so as a songwriter, I always try to stay in the Book of Psalms as much as I can, just to kind of keep my brain and heart in the way that you'd see these men of old, praising the Lord. And so I was reading through Psalm 130 one night, and it said, "I wait for the Lord, my soul waits, and in His word I do hope." And so I just had a couple chords and started singing it. And honestly, at the time, I didn't think much of it. It actually came pretty quick. I just started, singing it that night and recorded it in my phone or I think I had a little tape player at the time, because phones weren't there actually back in the day. Wasn't a phone, because I didn't really think much of it as it being like a congregational song. In fact, I really wasn't thinking in those terms all that much back in the day. I wanted to write, and there wasn't there was like the praise band era, really. It was kind of the end of the praise band era in the mid 90s. It's kind of coming to its end, I think, there. So all the songs are big and huge arrangements and stuff. So this was like a real simple song, like 4 chords and the truth, It was like, so one night at a college retreat or college study, I shared it, sang it. Just thought, I'll just try it, see if people sing. And they started singing along, and some comments that they liked it. And so I was like, gosh, I didn't even see people singing it, but they liked it. So anyway, at the time, Jeremy Camp was actually going to the Bible college here. He was actually working with us on staff there. We'd played together a little bit back in the day, and so he ended up signing with a label to do a one-off record deal. My friend worked for BEC at the time. He was looking for guys to do like a one-off worship record, and so Jeremy was kind of looking for that at the time. So it worked out great. So he ended up wanting to put "I Wait for the Lord" on it because he liked it, he heard it, and sung it. So part of the cool song story for that for me is I had been writing for a little while, and I wanted to record a project, but I just didn't have the money at all. And it usually takes a little bit of funds to do that, Yeah. And so he ended up recording it, and they recorded the whole project. And then they liked him so much, like, well, let's do like an artist deal. I'd love to sign you as an artist. So they ended up signing him as an artist. And so they ended up holding that project, not releasing it, signed him as an artist. He released his first like artist CD, and it got huge. He just did really, really well. So they let that go run for a couple years. So meanwhile, Jeremy's like doing great. He's signed. He's not at Vista anymore. He's just touring and just ministering through music. And then they're going to release this worship project that had "I Wait for the Lord" on it. And so meanwhile, I was still writing songs and had a desire to record. I wasn't sure how that would ever happen. So they released it, and then the project did really, really well. Jeremy was doing great, sold really well, and I get a check in the mail for that song, and it was like a substantial check. I think it might have been like $14,000 or something like that. For the first check from. I was like, what in the world is this? And it was like the Lord saying, providing for me to do my first album. And so the money that came from the song, I was able to like record my first project called Grace Amazing back in the day, and it was just, to me, amazing, God's provision, and he just how the Lord provided for us to be able to record it. And so, yeah, it's just a cool song story because I wasn't looking for that. I wasn't planning for that. But the way the Lord did it was really, really special. And it's just cool how the Lord, so that was like, and I was really encouraged. I felt like at that time, the Lord was giving me a number of songs, and I was singing them at church. We started singing them at, youth group and youth camps, and some churches were singing it and stuff like that. So I felt like this kind of like excitement and momentum. And some guys are really prolific in writing, and for me it would be kind of seasonal, like walk through something, Lord would teach me something, and I try to capture that in song if I could. And as a writer, you write some songs that will seem like they work and some that don't, but that would, some seasons.
Totally, so cool. I never knew that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I think, not only is the Lord use you so powerfully as a pastor throughout the years, and doing His work through you as a worship leader in building up those teams in the School of Worship, but it was just so evident that one of the primary ways He's used you is through the songs that the Lord has given you, the songs that you have written for the church. And I know one song in particular for me that has been ministering to my heart for so many years, and I've been able to play it and lead it a couple of times too at our chapels here at the school, and just even at my church, my dad's church back in New York. And it's the song "Satisfied in You." And I remember I was a kid and I heard that song when I lived in New York at a Calvary chapel when I was a little one, and I remember hearing that one and it really ministered to my heart. And so if you don't mind maybe telling the song story behind Satisfied in You, because I know a lot of churches have sung that one, and so it's definitely been used.
Yeah, that one's interesting because I was actually here at Marietta, and I was at a bookstore convention, I'm sorry. At the time, Calvary Distribution would host these bookstore conventions for all the Calvary chapels to come together, and guys that had their bookstores in their church. And so I was leading worship for that, and then there was a few speakers that were teaching, and Rich Chafin from Sacramento was teaching that morning. He was teaching on just living for the glory of God, living for His pleasure, and running for his just his fame, His glory. And I remember sitting in there, and as he's talking, he just said it very simply in a few ways, and I remember just thinking, oh man, that's beautiful. It's just a great prayer to pray. And then I had this melody idea in my head, so I remember walking out in the middle of his study, just like, I need to sing this into my phone. I did have a phone at that time. Phones weren't a thing at that point, and so I ended up singing it into the phone and recording it, like the basic idea of it. And it was just a very, very simple song. It was just want to satisfied in You. Want to just live a life for Your glory, run for Your fame. Like David would say, I want to dwell in Your house forever, seek Your face to hear You say, well done. So it's kind of like a mixture of Old Testament, David's heart, and then New Testament truth of Jesus when He talks about, hearing the Father say, well done, my good and faithful servant. So that's kind of the prayer, that desire of us as all Christians, is we want to live a life that honors the Lord. And so it's that responding to God's grace. So that life of worship is that it's responding to the grace of God. It's not doing those things to earn God's favor. We have His favor. We have His forgiveness. So now we live a life of responding to God's grace, and living for His glory. So that is the life of the Christian. So to me, it was just a simple prayer. I didn't think really that much of it, in the sense of I was excited to sing it and to share it, but it's always amazing to me how the Lord uses a song. It just takes it way further than you would have thought. And the fact that you're still singing it today at the Bible college is crazy to me. It's like, it's such a blessing.
Yeah, just thank you for that, and your obedience to the Lord in that. So songwriting is something that's so important for the church today, and I know you know that. I know that you definitely have that heart and that burden for the church today, that there should be new songs being sung in the church. And like, I believe it's Psalm 98 or somewhere in the Psalms that says, oh, sing to the Lord a new song, for He has done marvelous things. And I love that whole idea of sing to the Lord a new song because of the marvelous things that God has done. And so I believe new songs are continually being birthed in the church because God is constantly doing a new thing. We are writing new songs. And so I would guess, just to get a little bit practical for maybe the worship leaders who are watching this, or songwriters who want to be leading worship and writing songs for their church, what are some practical, maybe just tips and tools to kind of that they can maybe take away to help them develop that gift of songwriting?
Yeah, I think the initial encouragement of just wanting to encourage those that are writing, that have a heart to write, to not be afraid. We're talking about it before in our class today of how a lot of times fear and comparison and insecurity can keep us from actually being creative. Like, God's made us creative beings. He's made us in His image. He's the great creative. He's the great creator. So He's made us in His image to be able to create. And so not many people. There's a good chunk of people that are made musical, but not many. You think it's a unique, skill set that God gives to some people. God makes other people really creative in business or in building or in whatever vocation or gifting God's made them. But I believe if God's giving you that gift to play music, that you should explore that ability to be creative. And what part of that team are you? Are you like the person that comes up with great melody or great chord structure or lyric, or where do you sit in that team or that gifting that God's given you? Because that, like you said, all the way through Psalms, we're exhorted to sing our praise and to sing new songs. Sing a new song to the Lord. All the way through the book of Psalms, there's that exhortation, constantly to sing a new song to the Lord. So I just think the amount of songs that we can sing is just endless, because there's endless ways and things we can say about the Lord. And so I think what we're doing as songwriters is trying to find new ways to communicate old truth, to current generation, So new ways to maybe say it in ways that haven't been said before, capture it in a way that has never been captured before. So that's kind of the challenge, and it's kind of the exciting part of being able to write, is realizing that songs have a powerful effect. I think it was Martin Luther that said, I place music next to theology and give it the highest praise. He just placed so much value on the church singing the gospel, singing truth into their soul, because there's something powerful about how a melody connected to truth, a strong melody with, good truth connected to good music, can just weave its way into the depths of your heart to where you don't forget it. Like, you might forget a sermon, you might forget a teaching, but there's something about songs. A strong melody can just stick with you. I mean, there's so many strong melodies that are in my head from just commercials as a kid. I just think of these ridiculous commercials, jingles that have been written, that just are always, they're going to be embedded in my head forever. Yeah. But there's also so many wonderful songs that are connected to just gospel truth that just meet me in really deep areas of my heart. So the need for the church to keep writing songs that are true and Christ honoring and point people to the Lord and remind them of his promises, and songs that praise, songs that pray, songs that declare who God is. I mean, they're all so valuable. And even talking about before, even story songs that are, maybe they're not congregational songs, but songs that are going to kind of tell a story in a different way that we might not, lead in a congregational setting, but somebody might share as a ministry tool, to kind of people to find themselves in that song. I think of guys like Bob Bennett. They're just like amazing song crafters. They can just craft a story in a way that it puts you right in that place. Like, it resonates with you, and you're like, oh yeah, I felt that. I've been there. And so the need is huge. And it's great because there's so many different kinds of songs you can write. There's so many different giftings, various giftings in songwriting. For me, I love writing for the church. I love writing songs that we could sing together. But not every song I write fits that category. Like, sometimes I'll write a song that I think it's decent, but we're not going to sing it. It's not maybe congregational, but on the album that we recorded, the Lord will use it to encourage somebody. So not every song for me. I don't try to push it into that box. I don't try to force it in there. But some songs do fit that mold. So I'd say, man, if you're a writer, just stir up that gift of God that's in you. We were talking about that earlier. Like Paul was telling young Timothy, stir up the gift of God that's in you. And that very next verse in context is, for God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of love and of power and of a sound mind. So there's a lot of fear connected to stepping out in faith and using your gifts. If you're teaching, if you're leading, if you're doing whatever, the fear of man, the fear of failure, all those fears, that the what if scenarios, we can't listen to that. You can't give into that. If you do, you bury the gift. You diminish the opportunities that the Lord wants to use it. Yeah, people might not like us, and people might not like the songs, and people might not appreciate it, but we're not doing it for people, Ultimately for the Lord, that God would use it to encourage people, but not to be liked by people per se. So that's what we struggle with as artists. We, like a painter paints a painting, it's, what do you think? Oh, you don't like it? Oh, so, Yeah. So songwriting's the same way. Is you got to write in faith and believe God's going to use it, and the more you write, the better you get at it, and it's a muscle that you exercise. You just got to keep using.
So you keep exercising that muscle. It gets stronger. It develops. So I guess, what are some exercises, or maybe some even just some more practical things? Like, is there a time that you schedule to write weekly? Is like a every other day thing, or how do you? Yeah. What are some exercises, I guess, to develop that?
A really good exercise, I think, is your calendar. Is just calendaring in time to be creative, because there's moments of inspiration that are awesome, but really songwriting is a mixture, like 10%, I've heard it said, like 10% inspiration, 90% perspiration. It's work. It actually takes a lot of work to finish a song. It's easy to start an idea and be creative. You have talked about this before, but like a song seed. Brian Dorcas said that, God gives you song seeds, and it's our responsibility to water that seed and to cultivate that and to see it grow into fruition and to actually bear fruit. So, rarely does a song ever just come to you. There are those moments. There's a few songs I can look back on and go, this song was just in the moment, it was all written, it was done. But a lot of songs are okay, they're as an idea, and I need to cultivate it. Some songs have taken me 3 years to write. I'll have the bridge or the chorus, I'll just keep coming back to the chorus. I love this chorus, but I can't think of verses for it. So when I you know, and those are the times I feel like I really need strong encouragement for somebody to say, hey, finish that song, you know, because I'll tend to want to give up on it. Like, gosh, should it be this hard? Really, should it be this difficult? And in some ways, I think it keeps us seeking the Lord. It keeps us like, we need to be diligent with our time. And some songs need seasons to walk through. I just finished a song for this last project called Greater Still. And I had this, the chorus was like, coming from the idea of 1 John, where even if your heart condemns us, God is greater than our heart and knows all things. So it's really a song talking about failure, like when we fail. And to me, it was a really vulnerable song. It was like many seasons in life where you feel like, okay, I've failed. As I'm a Christian, I'm a worship leader, I'm a pastor, I failed. Like, I should be better than this, you know? And the reality is, like, we all fail, we all sin. And so I was writing this song, you know, with that kind of honest, like, even when I fall, you're there to catch me. Even when I stumble, you are there. Every time my heart, it does condemn me. But Lord, your grace is greater still, was the chorus. Wow. And I just had that, you know, I'm like, okay, that's a really true statement, you know, even when I fail. But I'm basically admitting I fail and that I sin. But of course, the Bible says if we say we have no sin, we lie and we don't tell the truth. So it's this mixture of, yeah, we've been made righteous, we've made holy, we have the forgiveness of God. And then our daily experiences, we have these victories and we have moments of failure when my mind isn't thinking the things it should, you know, or I'm tempted in ways that, gosh, I should be over that, you know, I should be, you know, stronger than that. But our flesh is, you know, vulnerable and weak. So I was writing out of that place, but I didn't have any verses. And so the verses I was writing were very much like, they were very vulnerable. It's like, okay, like, do I want to say it that way? Should I say it really that? But I'm like, you know what? I need to be honest. I need to say it the way that I feel it and the way that you go through it. And so those verses were like, here I am, you know, fighting things I just can't win. I fight and fail, I fall again, and I just want to run. You know, that's like my emotion. You know, gosh, I've wrestled with this for so long, and I fall again. You know, what's wrong with me? And I just want to run away. So sometimes in failure, you want to push away from the Lord. And then the second verse is like, but here I stand, humbled by the cross again, knowing you still call me friend. Wow. I don't want to run. You know, I really don't want to run. I want to be close to you, Lord. So the chorus is, I don't want, you know, the end of the verse, I don't want to run, because even when I fall, you're there to catch me. When I stumble, you're there. Every time my heart, it does condemn me. Lord, your grace is greater still. The bridge takes it a little further in that thought of, for even when my heart faints, your love speaks. It draws me back over and over again. You know, it's like that picture of, you know, God's never-ending grace. He draws me back over and over again. Yeah, you fell, you blew it, but come back. You know, like, I have 5 children, and the wonderful thing about having 5 children is you have one, you're like, I love this child so much. How could I ever love a child as much? Then the next one's born, you're like, oh, I love this child also, you know, just as much, but in their unique way. So every child you love so much, and all of them fail, and they all blow it, you know. But I would never, as a dad, be like, oh, you failed again, really? Well, change your last name. You're supposed to be a Cunningham. What's wrong with you? Cunninghams don't fail. You know, I would never do that. It'd be like, no, honey, I get that, you know. I understand. But, you know, let's work on that together. Let's walk through this together. Let's you know, grow through this together. So, and how much more with God, who's our Father? It would just be he's so patient with us, and he picks us up when we fall. Psalms, a righteous man falls 7 times, gets back up. You know, the Lord, he's not done with us. You know, he's not finished with us. And so the enemy would condemn. God convicts. The enemy pushes us away from God. It's the voice of the enemy that sometimes we think might be the voice of God, but we need to learn to discern his voice, that we don't push him away. God's not pushing us. He's drawing us even in failure, moments of failure. So anyway, so songwriting for me has been very much like something the Lord uses to remind me of truth and minister to my own heart. And then some of those are very vulnerable, like moments of, hey, this is what you're struggling with, and then hopefully people it resonates with people. And it's so funny because that song was the song I was so not sure I was going to put on this last project, and then and I just felt like, I need to do that, and I put it on there, and it's the one that's like most streamed right now, you know, than all the other ones. And so I was like, okay, well, maybe it's resonating with people too. Like, that was the song they needed to hear. And there's songs that come out of just like times of great praise, you know. I think of a song I wrote recently called Steadfast Love, and and I was reading through Psalms again, and I always typically have read through New King James. It's kind of my translation I just grew up with, and I kind of memorize Scripture, think about Scripture in that way. But I was reading through the ESV and just, last couple years through Psalms, and so they take that word loving kindness and he replaces it with steadfast love. And there's this old Calvary's classic, steadfast love of the Lord never ceases, his mercies never come to an end, they're new every morning, great is thy faithfulness. And it's a great song, but I'm like, we haven't really sung steadfast love, more recently in this generation. Is there a way we can say that, sing that? So kind of came up with a melody and wrestled with it for a while and invited some people into the process. So my daughter Maddie and then another friend Chaz, he wrote like a line to it, a couple words in the bridge, and that's another thing I would say is a really great tool for songwriting is collaboration, because sometimes we hold those ideas really close, like, oh, this is my baby, I don't want to let this go, I don't want someone to hijack it or whatever. But the reality is, you just find people that you love and trust, you respect them, they respect you, and you present that to them, and they're like, oh, that's great, what about this, or what about that? Paul Volosh is so great. He's always saying, like, make sure you keep that collaboration really light and very positive and very, like, joyful and very, when people put up ideas, don't shoot it down immediately. Say, like, oh, yeah, that's cool. Well, maybe that could be good. And you write it down, validate their idea, but, you don't have to marry it. You just can, so use the word maybe, just to keep it light. Well, maybe, yeah, that's cool, maybe. And it's so true. In collaboration, you want you know how easy it is to shut down if someone's like, oh, no, that's so done. That's been said a million times before. And like, oh, forget it, our sensitive musician heart. Yeah. So keeping it light and keeping it really joyful and playful, as Brenton Brown would say, is important. But bringing people into that is really fun. I don't know if we have time for another song story, but
no, go for it.
Okay, so just more information than you wanted right now.
No, it's great.
So recently we did a conference a year and a half ago called "Carry the Name" as a worship conference, and I was listening to a study by Louis Giglio, and it was on as believers we're called to carry the name of Christ. We carry His name into our work. We carry His name into the different environments God puts us in. Is that we're carriers of the name. We have this ability, this mission, and this responsibility. So, and I was listening to it, oh man, that's so true. As worship leaders, that's what we're doing. We're carrying the name of Christ, and we get to carry His name through music and communicate His truth, God's truth through that medium of music. We're carrying the name. So I was started trying to write the song for it. Thought, oh, maybe we could have like a theme song for the conference, and so I had an idea, and I thought, okay, Paul's going to be there this year. Paul's like a great songwriter, and we had become friends the last year through a couple different things, and I thought maybe I'll just send it to him and see what he thinks. I'm like, no, that's stupid. He's going to think this is dumb, and I'm not going to do it. And a friend of mine at work just said, send it to him. Just don't be afraid. Just send it to him. I'm like, all right, I'm going to do it. So I just shot him the voice memo, and he shot it right back. He's like, hey, bro, just got your message. I'm in a taxi in New York, but I'm kind of hearing this. What do you think about this? He sings this like verse idea into it. I'm like, yeah, that's a great idea, Yeah. So I start writing it down and putting it together. So we were just going back and forth through voice memo, and he's going to be at the conference, and it was getting really close, and I think we kind of nailed down the chorus. We were kind of refining the verse, and I had a bridge idea, but the bridge was like way too long and too many words, and it was a bit of a Lord of the Rings trilogy idea. It wasn't going to work, It was like, okay, it's too much. Trying to shove too much in it. So I wasn't quite settled. This isn't done. And so at the time, Matt Redmond has moved into Orange County, and he had asked he was looking for a studio to rent. So he was renting our studio at Costa Mesa to do some overdub stuff and some demo stuff. And so we kind of, struck a friendship off from that. And same thing, I was like, we were just talking about songwriting, and he just audibly said, hey, do you write songs? I was like, yeah, I do. I've been writing for some years. I enjoy it. He's like, hey, we should write sometime. I was like, sure, yeah, maybe sometime, and excited, but like super scared. Like this is I'm a village idiot compared to that, But I thought, oh, and it was a neat opportunity. I remember my some friend's voice in my head. It's like, you need to do it. Stop being afraid. So, and one day he was in there. I was like, hey, I did have an idea. I wanted to run by you, see what you thought. He's like, sure, mate, just let me know. So I shot him a voice memo. And the next day he goes, it's good, it's good. And I specifically said the bridge. I'm not sure about the bridge. And he had a few thoughts on the verse. He goes, but the bridge? He goes, yeah. goes, if it were me, he goes, I would probably do that a little different. I kind of simplify it and take it from like carry the name. So kind of like dive in a little deeper on the name. Like, what is it about the name that's, and so he starts talking about the name, and he just sings this idea, about the name of God. And so it was so great. It was really simple, and I would have not thought that simple, but it was really simple, but it was perfect fit for what we were doing. And I was like, of course, that's totally it. Wow. So for me, it was like a bucket list moment. It was cool. Collaboration with a couple heroes of songwriting that I would never have seen possible before. And then the Lord just opened the opportunity, and it was just special for me. And they treated me like just an average guy. They weren't like, they're just very down to earth and super humble guys, and they weren't vibing me out or didn't, they were just super cool about it. And so anyway, I was like, that song would have never been that song if I would have just sat on it and been too afraid to try and ask other friends. And then the same album, a friend of mine, we got together to write, and he had a chorus idea, and then he let me in on it, and I said, well, that's so awesome. What about a verse idea like this? And so there, in that songwriting moment, you just kind of respect the person who brought the idea and say, hey, I kind of hear this. I don't know what you think. Take it or leave it. And you kind of have that mutual respect. You don't like, oh yeah, well I think you really need to do this, and that's a bad idea. And so in those moments, if you don't have that kind of mutual respect, it kind of loses its momentum. So anyway, collaboration is a huge tool for songwriting, and the song will become 10 times better than if I would have just kept it to myself. You know what I mean? So I went way on a tangent, but
no, that was super helpful, especially for me too, because I was. When I would write songs if I ever did, it was always just a solo thing, and never brought anyone into it because I was so afraid of them judging me too. I was just they're going to think this is dumb. Why would they ever want to collaborate with me on this idea? Yeah. But it's become so much more valuable when you add some people, because they have so many gifts that complement yours, and that maybe gifts that you don't have that they can add to the table. So
not to be offended if they listen to it and there's no idea that comes to mind. You just go, they say, God, yeah, I don't really, and you just go, cool, no problem. Just invite maybe somebody else into it, because there are the moments where it will click and you'll have this chemistry, and then it will become way better than it was. Absolutely. So as I've gotten older, I've realized, man, the song is 10 times better when I just open hand, let it go. Like, what do you think? And instead of holding it so close, it's my precious. It's like, just let it go a little bit.
For sure.
There's the guys that are very prolific and guys that will write way better than I'll ever write, but I feel like I'm supposed to still just keep stirring up that gift, and as the Lord gives me opportunity to keep writing. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of these things with us today, and this was such a blessing, so helpful, and I pray just equips and like helps the foundation of the next generation just to grow in their gift and their walk with Jesus too. So thank you so much for joining us today, and I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Appreciate it.
Of course.